Hello everyone, welcome to the Testing Diary channel. In this video, we will learn about different components which are available for JMeter to make a performance test script. So in this, we will see like what are the components provided by JMeter and what are its uses. Okay, but before that, we will learn about what does a JMeter test script looks like. So this is a typical JMeter script structure. I'll just zoom it out. And it can have a test plan, and under that test plan the script can have a multiple thread groups like as in depicted in this picture. Test plan will have a number of thread groups, but a script will only have one test plan. Okay, so just that you don't get confused, script will only have a one test plan, but it can contain a number of thread groups under that test plan. Okay, and in turn the thread group will contain different components as shown in this picture. It will have some the samplers or listeners, some config elements and all those things. So in this we will see the uses of all those elements, like all these components, what are the sampler used for, what are the listeners used for, and all those things. Okay, so let's start with samplers. So samplers are the main building blocks of JMeter, I would say. They perform the actual work of JMeter. So what they do is they send the request to the server, and server will return the response for that request. So samplers are nothing but the components which sends the request to server. And some of the commonly used samplers are the HTTP request sampler, the FTP request sampler, uh, SMTP sampler if you want to load test the SMTP server, JDBC request sampler which is used to load test your JDBC database, and the debug sampler is used for the debugging purpose. So if you see any JMeter script, so you will see that the samplers are used to send a request to the server. So this is the sampler, and it sends the request to the server, and server will return the response. Okay, so those are samplers, so they send the request to server, and to view the results of those requests we use listeners. So listeners are the one which displays the test results. So and these results can be saved for the later use. So let's say if you have sent a request to the server for a load test, so to view that request's result, you'll have to use the listeners, and you can store the listeners use and you can store the listeners results, and so that you can use it for later on if you want to view the test results. Okay, so and some of the commonly used listeners are the view results tree, summary report, the aggregate report, view results tree, view results in table, and aggregate graph. So we'll cover all these listeners in details once we have the f- once we so we'll cover this listeners in further lectures when we cover the advanced JMeter scenarios. Okay, so in the JMeter script, so this is the sample JMeter script, and if you see the view results tree and the summary report, these two are listeners. So let's say if I run my JMeter script, so the sampler will be sending a request to the server, and to view the results of those requests, I'll be using the this thing listeners. So this is the view results tree, and we can view the result of that particular request over here. So this is the view results tree, and similarly this summary report listener uh, is also used for displaying the test matrix. So yeah, so listeners are that they show us the test results. Coming to the next components, which are the config elements. And now they are used to set up any configuration and defaults. So let's say you want to set any defaults in your load test. Let's say you want to set the default environment for your load test script. So in that case, you can use the config elements. Suppose you also want to configure the different user accounts to use for your load test. So config elements like CSV dataset config specifically provides that particular functionality. So yeah, config elements provides the setup for the configuration and setting up the defaults for your load test. Some of the commonly used config elements are this CSV dataset config, the HTTP request defaults, the HTTP cookie manager, cache manager, and the HTTP header manager. So I'll show you the config elements in my script. So these are the config elements. If you view this HTTP cookie manager, so this is used to manage the cookies. If your application uses the cookies, so that can be managed. That functionality can be managed using the HTTP cookie manager in the script. Similarly, if you want to specify the headers in your request, you can make use of this HTTP header manager config element. So it assigns the headers to your HTTP request. So these are some of the configuration element, and they are used for setting up the configurations and the defaults for your load test. The next one is the processors. So there are like two types of processors, the pre-processors and the post-processors. So as the name suggests, the pre-processors run before the samplers. So before you run this request, like before this request is run, the pre-processor, if it is added under this particular request, it will be executed, and then the sampler will be executed. So this can be useful in many more scenarios in the load test. So we'll know about that once we proceed with the further lectures. And another type of processors are the post processors. So those are executed after the sampler is run. So let's say this login request is run, and then this is the post processor. So this will be executed once the login request is run. Okay, so this particular component, actually gets the access token to be used in the further requests, right? So this needs to be called after the login request is executed. Okay, so for that purpose, we are using the post processors. Okay, so like processors are those pre and post processors, and they are executed before and after the sampler is executed. Okay, and some of the commonly used processors are the regular expression extractor, JSON, JSR223, XPath, and Bean shell processors. And then we'll have the logic controllers. So they are used to implementing any logic in your script, and they also help in organizing the test script. So let's say if you want to make your JMeter script to have the some request, you want to execute some of the request multiple times. So this is sort of a logic that you want to implement in your JMeter scripts. To do that, you'll have to make use of the logic controllers. And if you see the script that I have prepared, the loop controller is the logic controller. So what happens is I can run these two requests, the get employees and get employee details request multiple times using the loop controller. So I have set the loop count as 2. So whatever requests that are under that particular controller will be executed twice. So if you see the results, so the login is out of the loop controller, so it will be executed only once. And the get employees and get employee details is under the are under the loop controller, and loop controller is set to 2, so they will be executed twice. You see, the get employees are executed twice, same as for the get employee details, right? So such kind of logic implementation can be done using the logic controllers. They can also help in organizing the test script. So let's say if you want to organize these two requests and want to have only one combined results for these two requests, you can do that with the help of the logic controllers as well. So we'll cover these topics in the further sections. And some of the commonly used logic controllers are this, like the loop controller that we have just seen. We can set the if condition for our load test as well. So if controller is also used frequently. simple controller, transaction controller, and random controller. So these are all the commonly used the logic controllers. The next one is timers. So they help in implementing the delay between requests. So typically, what will happen is when you are designing a load test script, so you will need to add a sort of delay between the requests that you are sending. Okay, so if you consider a real life scenario, so user will not be continuously hitting your application like a hammer, right? So what they will do is they will wait for some page to load, then they will go through the content of that page, then they will click on some next page. So there is some delay involved from the user's part, and to simulate that particular scenario, we'll need to use the timers. And some of the commonly used timers are the constant timer, uniform random timer, synchronizing timer, and JSR 223 and Bayesian timers. So if you see in my script, uh, I have the constant timer under the get employees call. So what it does is it adds the delay uh, before the get employees call is run. So in this script, what will happen is once the user is performed the login call, the script will wait for this amount of time, like 3000 milliseconds. That is 3 seconds, and then it will call the get employees call. And similarly, I have also defined constant timer for the get employee details, and that is 1 second. So after this get employees call is executed, the script will wait for 1 second, and then it will execute the get employee details. So this kind of configuration can be set using the timers. And last we have the assertions, and as the name suggests, the assertions are used to perform checks on the sampler result, and they can be used to verify, the results that are received as part of your request. And like whether you want to check, like you want to check whether the particular text is there in the response or not. Okay, so these are the assertions, and they can mark the sampler as pass and fail accordingly. So let's say you want to check that particular text is there on the response, but if it is not there, then you want to mark it as fail. So those kind of functionality can be implemented by the assertions. And some of the commonly used assertions are the response assertion, size, duration, JSR 223, and beam shell assertion. So in my script, I have already added one of the assertions in the get employees request. So it is checking whether the first name text is there in the response or not. So if you see here, get employee, you will see that the first name is available. So it is marking the request as passed. But let's say if for some reason the get employees request fails and the first name is not returned, so that will mark the call as failed. Okay. So these are all the JMeter components, and it can be used to make different JMeter scripts. So this lecture was just to give you an overview about all these components, different JMeter components, so that you can have the idea, the basic idea about what they are used for, and you will get to know more about them once we cover them in detail in the virtual further lectures. Okay, so that's all about this lecture, and you will learn more about the JMeter from our next tutorials. So stay tuned for that, and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. And yeah, that's all. Thanks for your time. Bye bye.